French, they take and never give anything back, ever. Still this day, they've been in places 300-400 years, and that place in areas in Africa has never developed not 1 inch.
You've declared that the future is in Africa, and I think the world knows that, which is why China's there and other nations haven't given up their relationships, right? Because most of
100%.
France's revenue still comes from Africa.
90% of France's revenue comes from Africa.
People say that France is technically a broke nation, and which is why they don't come off the relationships, the very colonial still relationships they have with many nations in Africa.
100%.
Keep them broke, France is rich, et cetera, et cetera.
I've been very concerned lately about China. You know, they're in Africa. They're lending money to countries to build ports and different infrastructure.
To build what?
Port.
And
harbors.
what's wrong with that?
And well, because
countries that need ports get ports.
But they're making people dependent on. I mean, I know it's the same thing that we've done, which is
no, it's not.
Around the world.
They are far more humanistic than the United States ever was.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. So.
Let me give you an example. Of course, they are peddling for influence.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they are non-interventionist, absolutely non-interventionist in a way that Europeans, the West, has never managed to fathom.
France occupied Burkina Faso for generations. They stole gold and uranium, billions of dollars of resources for pennies on the dollar, while the people of Burkina Faso suffered. But Burkina Faso's new revolutionary leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, says no more. Traoré has kicked out all of the French troops from his country in Africa. He has banned exports of gold to Paris, and he has dropped French as the official language of Burkina Faso. It's a total cultural, political, and economic reset. Now, obviously, French President Emmanuel Macron is kind of upset with all of this. He has made his position known. And President Traoré beautifully responded. He said, if anyone is ungrateful, it is him, Emmanuel Macron. France exists today thanks to our ancestors. They should pray for us. And Burkina Faso is making it clear that this is not about some attack on France. This is about independence and sovereignty. Just last week, Burkina Faso's President Traoré decided to release 4 French spies who were guilty of attempting to commit a coup against the president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, in 2022. The message is clear. Burkina Faso is not the pawn of France or the Dutch or the United States anymore, but forgiveness is also at the heart of their revolution. Traoré says that this is not just a split, it is a revolution with global ripples.
The solution is not to move Africans to Europe, but to free Africa from certain Europeans. France continues to exploit Africa by printing currency for 14 African nations, making children work in mines, extracting raw materials, as happens in Niger, where France extracts 30% of the uranium it needs to run its nuclear power plants, while 90% of Nigerians live without electricity. Don't come here to lecture us, Macron, because Africa is fleeing from you.
Only if the African people can come together, starting now in West Africa, and tell, in this case, the colonial power France, to get the hell out, to keep your paltry development aid, to forget about the idea that you can power yourself at our expense while we live in darkness and penury. You live as a superpower, as a nuclear-armed superpower with veto, vote and power in the United Nations. While we remain poor, you are rich.
I heard a French economist saying, Africans must remain poor. Everything possible must be done to keep Africans poor. And he even said, the West would rather go to war than allow Africans to develop. Because if they develop themselves, then the standard of the West is going to drop.
Correct.
That's what he says.
Correct.
So I said, no, I want to see the standard drop. I am tired of seeing African leaders with begging bowls, going to a continent that doesn't have minerals.
Yeah.
This has to change.
What happens to African countries that reject the CFA, this French colonial currency? Operation Persil is what happens to them. It's 1958 and a wave of independence is blowing through West Africa. The former French colonies want total independence and sovereignty. It starts in Algeria in the north. The Algerian crisis happens. As a result, the French government collapses. Charles de Gaulle is a French military commander. He is made the head of the French government at this point. So in response to this crisis, Charles de Gaulle goes around West Africa. He visits West African countries trying to cajole them, trying to convince them that they should not go for total sovereignty and independence, but they should try and stay in a sort of confederation, a sort of community with France. So some West African countries have acquiesced to this plan, but in one West African country, then known as French Guinea, a man called Ahmed Sékou Touré says, no, my people would rather be poor and free than rich and slaves. So Sékou Touré and his Guinean people vote no on this referendum to become a part of a French community. They completely reject this proposal and they are going to pay the ultimate price. Economic sabotage. What happens next is known as Operation Persil, named after the detergent Persil, because apparently, according to French intelligence services, they were going to clean up Guinea as a country. They, in typical French fashion, throw the biggest tantrum in history. They go around, the French colonialists and everyone, all of the occupiers, all of the French occupiers in Guinea, go around completely running amok, causing chaos. They unscrew light bulbs out of their sockets. They destroy sewage pipelines. They burn books and administrative official documents. They go around and burn and destroy medicine that is sitting in pharmacies just so that the Guinean people do not use any of it. They believe that they brought all semblance, all kind of anything that was useful. They believe, as the French colonialists, that they are the ones that brought these things to Guinea, so they must leave with them. They cannot leave any good thing, any useful thing for the Guinean people. This was known as Operation Persil. French intelligence services also supported armed insurgents who went on to destabilize Guinea as a newly independent nation. The French government also refused to pay pensions to Guinean soldiers who had just then finished fighting on the side of France against Nazi Germany. This is what happens to African nations who refuse to comply with French rules, including this economic policy that completely undermines African nations' ability to grow economically. Former French President Jacques Chirac famously said, without Africa, France would slide down to a position of a third world power. How self-aware? It's true.
France is still taking $500 billion a year out of Africa right now, out of their 14 ex-colonies, because they made them sign the Pact of the Continuation of Colonization back in the late 50s. And they had no choice but to sign.
And what does that look like? Because that means, so whenever these 14 countries that are, part of that, like when they have goods that they want to export, they can't because...
Yes, they can, but they have to export them to France.
They have to export them to France.
And then have to buy back. They have to buy back the products. They export the natural resources, the raw materials, and then they have to buy back the products from France.
With their money.
With their money. Now, France also forces them to spend to give up to 85% of their GDP to France. Up to 85%, right? They force them to give them French companies the first right of refusal for every public or private contract, right?
So if they say, hey, we got some cocoa beans here, we want to sell it to America.
No economic sovereignty,
wow.
No food sovereignty, no power sovereignty, right? Because they're forced, again, to export their resources to France and then buy back the products to survive. That's what's going on right now.
And this
And
is
then
why the
France
countries are kicking them some.
exactly, and that's why, and France is taking the 500 billion and they invested in the stock market in France to the tune of trillions of dollars. Africa's not getting that. France is keeping that. And if somebody speaks up, they turn off the faucet of the currency because France is printing the currency for those 14 countries. That's why now you have people like present, like
Burkina Faso.
Burkina Faso.
Sure. What's the other guy? Niger and Mali.
Niger.
Those guys.
Exactly.
I'm glad it's happening. It's real.
Now, I don't want to say I told you so, but remember my video in front of the Egyptian obelisk in Paris when I said France owes everything to Africa? Well, since Africa has started seizing back their resources, France is literally collapsing like today. 200,000 motherfuckers rioting in the street. They throwing crepes at the police, hitting them with baguettes. I seen 2 motherfuckers sword fighting with baguettes. Motherfuckers the police, they talking about. No, I'm gonna laugh at people struggling, but the economy is falling the fuck apart. They sacked the prime minister, cut health care, cut holidays. So you gotta understand, our Western comforts, hey, I got them too, nigga. I do. Are the direct result of third world exploitation. Western luxuries are the result of imperialist exploitation, racist exploitation, straight like that. Act like we're an afterthought and should be grateful. But you turn off the pillaging of African, South American resources, castles crumble, my nigga. 14 African countries kicked France out. They've been giving 80% of their GDP to France. Niger nationalized the uranium. Burkina Faso nationalized the gold. Mali nationalized the gold. Senegal ejected the troops. What's up, babe? I'ma clean it up, okay? The point here being the colonized peoples of the world are the literal lifeline of the West. They've made themselves entirely dependent on our exploitation, which leads you to ask, the fuck they gonna do when we take the power back? It ain't gonna be sweet.
So now that Africa, 14 countries in Africa has cut France totally off. They told France that they will not be sending them no 85% of their income. They will not be doing it. They've been doing that shit since 1959 and they will no longer be doing it. France thought that Africa was playing. And no, they weren't. Because now France, their economy is tanking big time. They are in such a deficit. Their country is just falling. It's burning right now. It hasn't even been 3 months and they can't pay their bills. Those 14 countries in Africa is putting France fucking out of business. And that's only 14 countries.
France did not see what is happening in West Africa coming. So they find themselves at a time when they are very weak economically, when at home the population of immigrants is growing bigger and bigger. You go to cities such as Marseille, you find Algerians, you find Moroccans, you find Senegalese, you find Guineans, you find Burkinabe, and things are not happening as they used to be then.
We need Africa.